I unpack the contents of my suitcase. The moon is rising on an earth divided, and I'm here with my brothers and sisters trying to be the bridge. My 2 decades were dotted with important global moments. The right to gay marriage, the Human Genome Project, the referendum that freed South Sudan. So I took the flight thinking maybe we could change something. Life is more bitter when it's decided in your absence, so this was me showing up. From the air, Kakuma looked like any other refugee camp I'd seen before. From the ground, it brought to light the truth of an earth divided. 7 billion people at the breaking point. Hearing about crisis and seeing it are as different as speaking about change and making it. One is fleeting and relies on the attention span of a restless planet. The other is everlasting and delves to the core of what makes us human. I was 7 when the first astronauts populated the International Space Station. 11 when the tsunami hit Indonesia. 18 when the first Arab woman won the Nobel Prize. 19 when I voted for the first African American president's second term. 23 when women around the world marched in solidarity. 24 when I set foot in Kakuma. In December of 2010, a Tunisian street vendor set himself on fire and sparked the revolution that would define the decade. His life and the world continues to spring forward every day. His life, a flash on the proverbial timeline, as if the most important of moments are only accomplished before we are born or after we die. The refugee protocol, the eradication of smallpox, the day when we can all finally reverse the effects of climate change. I begin to wonder if the air was as restless when my mother marched for education, if the people were as divided when my godfather and his friends organized for freedom. How do you bridge a fissure that seems to transcend time? In the absence of progress, we put the truth, the future ahead at the expense of our own well-being. But the constant question, are we asking enough? Are we doing enough? And are we enough? Can we bring forth a change in paradigm so pronounced it begs the walls to break, it asks the earth to shake, and when it shakes, we grab onto the closest thing we can find. In my mind, we find each other. From Sana'a to Lesbos, from Berlin to DC, I saw people in London in solidarity with kids in Ramallah, mothers from Syria sending love to families at the border. On a Friday morning, I hear the news of New Zealand as I prepare for my own prayers. My scarf draped over my sister and I. The words, "Hello, brother, welcome," the last things plastered into our mind as one of the last things the uncle said before the shooter opened fire. There are no words for the perversion of a safe space, an offering of peace in a moment of solidarity. Nothing is more wonderful than the art of being free, but nothing is more difficult to learn how to use than freedom. Those words are as true today as they were in the 1800s. From vigils to protests, from planning sessions to movements, we're joined in our humanity. From dinners to prayer circles, we're bringing the good. We're growing up to become the leaders we wish for as kids, choosing triumph, choosing hope over the problems that threaten to erase us, making change not in spite of, but because of who we are. My grandmother never learned to read or write. Women weren't allowed to do that in Sudan back then. Yet I'm here, the daughter of immigrants, the granddaughter of an illiterate woman, a Muslim, a millennial, standing before you, unfazed by the people that still greet us with hatred, untouched by the words that denied our humanity. When the plane coasted over Kakuma, the fields of white below, too organized for stones, too low to be clouds, I wanted to close my eyes, but reality wouldn't allow me the luxury. Now I'm proud to say that yes, we're still stuck at 2 a.m., but 2 a.m. the day before our evolution. 2 a.m. the day before everything changes, as long as we change it together. The world is more bitter when it's decided in your absence, so this is us showing up. This is us choosing love. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. I haven't been that nervous in a long time. Thank you so much. 2 years ago, I stood in Darfur and saw this giant sign, which is where I'm from, a giant sign that said, Al-Amn Mas'uliyat al-Jami', which means security is the responsibility of all. And it had the faces of Janjaweed crossed out, it had weapons crossed out, and it was a campaign by the military to, I guess, promote their version of peace. And I thought to myself, no, peace is the responsibility of all. And I made a choice in that moment to try and spread the idea that we can create a collective responsibility for peace. In a place that felt like it hadn't moved for decades, a place that I had my whole life defined by, I thought, you know what, maybe it's time for us to move something. So I walked 1,000 kilometers across Sudan in 30 days, and thousands of people joined me across the way. It was 6 months. It was 6 months between when I saw the billboard and when we finished the walk. It was 9 months between when we took the last step of the walk and the revolution began, and it was 1 year between when we took the first step of the walk and the dictator fell. In 1 year, youth and people just like completely changed the history overnight, and the reality is that when people in power are not willing to engage with risk, it's often young people that are left to engage with that risk. I decided to put myself in between young people and the thing in danger because often all they have to engage with that risk is their own bodies, and they lose their bodies. And I found that out personally this year when even after all of that happened, my baby cousin, Mohammed, who I'm dedicating this talk to, was killed in January in the protests in Sudan. He was 15 years old. And it hit me very personally as someone who's in this space and who has a voice and has a platform and is fighting for it and always trying to remind people of the urgency. But taking that personal toll was a very personal reminder. It hurt, and it reminded me that we just have to keep moving, because in the space between when policy is thought of and when it's effected, there's a buffer zone where we lose people. And I've been losing people since I was very young, since the genocide in Darfur started, since these protests started. In that space, in that buffer space is where we operate, where every single one of you will operate. The reality is that these 10 years that we're talking about, the people on the ground cannot afford 10 years. 10 years even is too much. We need to do this now. So I've committed to engaging with risk and mitigating it as much as I can with my voice and with everything that I am. That's what I stand for. I'm asking you, what do you stand for, and will you stand with me? Thank you.